Hi Trisha, I am Samriddhi Pandey, Senior Mentor, LegalEdge, Student Success Team. Please, beta, tell me something about yourself.
Hi Samriddhi, my name is Trisha. I got an All India rank of 205 in CLAT, and I am now going to WVNU JS, which is more than a dream come true. Like I'm leaving next week, and it still doesn't feel real. I've been waiting for this moment for the past 6 months, but now that it's here, it's unreal.
Congratulations, Bache. How did you
Thank
plan
you.
on taking law as a career?
Okay, so I am a first gen lawyer, so I don't have a very exciting story of I've seen my parents or I've seen my chachu chachi. But one thing that my dadu and I used to do together was bond over this TV show called Adalat. And I remember being really taken by KD Pathak. And that this was probably fourth grade, so I wasn't even thinking about a career then. But I always like to think of that as the trigger which set forth the path of me taking up law as an option. But actually, my decision was not as emotional, it was more practical based because when 10th ended and we got our results, it sank in that I have to start thinking about my future. So I took 3 to 4 career counseling quizzes, and all of them had about 5 to 6 professions in common that would be best for me. So I did my research about all of them, and law was the one that stuck out most to me. So I stuck with it.
All right. So, in your case, in आपके बैच में CLAT एकदम suddenly एक new notification के साथ आया था, wherein उस साल 2 बार CLAT होता, and suddenly from May it came to December.
December, yeah.
तो very less time, 6 months only. तो वो क्या आप मतलब वो was it a shock? Did it create a panic? And how did you deal with that?
So there was definitely panic. I remember reading the notification 3 to 4 times and actually asking questions in classes like, is this a prank? Is this a joke? How are we not sure that it is not a hoax? But I was really shaken up about it because I have been preparing since 11th. So instead of 2 years, I had 1.5 years. So it wasn't that much of a difference, but I didn't realize it then. And up until the day of the exam, I complained about how it was on 18th of December and how it should have been after boards. But when it got over, I was so happy because when we were preparing for CLAT, even if we weren't giving 100% to school, it didn't matter as much because we could still focus on boards and do well in boards. If it would have been after boards, I would have probably tanked in both. So the best way to deal with it was just to compartmentalize and put CLAT first for 1.5 years.
How was your journey in Legal Edge?
So my journey in LegalEdge was absolutely wonderful. I enjoyed the online classes so much. I was in the gold batch, so we had the chat box to connect with our mentors. But even so, I never felt a disconnect. They were always there for us, even on the Telegram groups. They would repeat things whenever we asked them to. But I think the best part were the mock series and the way the analysis is shown, like the charts, the graphs, where you stand with regard to your classmates. Because I remember doing horribly on a mock. I scored probably 65, but then I saw that the highest was a 72. So comparatively, I haven't done that bad. And also, a very, very important part of any competitive exam is analyzing the marks that you have given. And the explanations Legal Edge gives makes it so much easier because if you try to do it on your own, you may try to explain the answer to yourself using a logic that is not entirely correct. So having that by my side was really very helpful.
All right. So you started a little early, since from your 11th standard itself. So what was your plan? As in, how did you decide it for yourself?
Okay, so I am a planner, but I am very bad at follow through. So I knew that if I am even 2% serious about law, I need to start now. So I was either going to do law or go into psychology. But psychology doesn't really have any entrances as such. So my dad and I we sat down and we discussed that even if you aren't sure until 12 starts, at least start with law because CLAT is a totally comprehension based passage, right? And if I were to sit for any other entrances, it would have helped me a lot in the long run too. So thankfully, I didn't have to sit for any other entrance. But I started in 11th because I knew that if I started in 12th, I would be overwhelmed by the pressure of starting something new in the same year as my board year.
So do you feel you had an upper edge as you started a little early?
I think I did have an upper edge, but unfortunately, I didn't utilize it as much because CLAT felt like it was so far away. I hate to admit it, but I didn't get serious until like 6 to 7 months before CLAT. Like I would probably take like one mock in 2 weeks and not analyze them as well. Like I would attend all the classes regularly, but sometimes my mind would flit away and I would like have to force myself to pay attention again. So I definitely could have done much better if I had paid more attention, but it all ended well, so I don't think about that anymore.
How did you plan your journey? As in, when you were in 11th and when you were in 12th. So initially, what was your plan? And then how did you change the whole plan as you had almost 2 years to prepare?
Okay, so like I said, in 11th, LAT felt like it was really, really far away. So I did place more emphasis on my school studies and projects. But the moment 12 started, it hit me. And I'm like, I don't care what the teachers say to me at this point. I have had teachers tell me that I would fail my pre boards and that I would not be able to do well in CLAT. And that can really shake a person's perspective, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you are supposed to educate me and teach me, and here you are demotivating me. But I decided that it does not matter what they say. My mentors are telling me something else, my parents are telling me something else, my gut is telling me something else. So in 12th, I placed such a heavy importance on CLAT. Like I started giving 2 to 3 mocks each week, analyzing them, attending classes regularly, making notes regularly, like putting my phone away. I'm like laser focused on this. So I did not study for my pre-boards at all, and I still managed to pass. So the only time I actually studied for school was from 19th December. Before that, like I would just pay attention in classes, but other than that, I knew that the moment I get home, it's glad for me.
Okay. So, as you can see, matlab, you in this entire journey of CLAT, so you might have faced a lot of problems, and
Yeah.
you were the only person who would have resolved it for yourself, or maybe you might have taken help from someone. So, what are all those problems, and how did you get the resolution?
Okay, so one very important problem that I have not heard a lot of people talk about is the emotional stress and mental pressure. So CLAT is not as competitive as, for example, JEE or NEET, but the competition still exists. You have to go head to head with 70,000 brilliant minds and still come out on top. And so my parents are very chill. They know that if I have to do something, I will do it. So they did not put as much pressure on me, but the pressure I put on myself, that harmed me more than anything else. So there were times where I was not sleeping enough, or I thought that staying up late was going to help me prepare better for CLAT. But when you're sleep deprived, you can't retain anything. And I did not understand that. Like, I was not eating healthy, I was not sleeping well, I was not doing well in interpersonal relationships with my friends. I would not talk to anyone about it. And I do think that set me back. So I fell sick in November, on 11th November to be precise, like exactly 1 month before daylight. And I was working myself to the bone to the point of physical and mental exhaustion, and my body just shut down. So for 3 days, I couldn't do anything. But that was actually the best thing that could have happened to me because I realized that the world hasn't ended. I mean, I am allowed to give myself a break and I should be allowed to step away for just a minute because if I do clear CLAT, but I lose myself in the process, I am going to have to go through 5 years of this all over again. So after 11th November, I actually entered a very different headspace of I don't care how much I'm scoring in mocks. So I did not pay attention to my scores at all. I just looked at the mistakes I was making and I worked towards rectifying them. Like I was not scoring well in my mocks even before CLAT. I was scoring in 70s or 80s, but in CLAT I got a 92. So it is very, very important to remember that every single mock is different. And just because you're scoring well in a mock does not mean you'll score well in CLAT. And just because you're not scoring well in a mock doesn't mean that you won't score well in CLAT.
All right. So, how did, as you were a school going kid, so how did you balance school and CLAT together?
Initially, very poorly. But like I said again, in 11th, 11th was completely online. So it was very, very easy for me because you don't spend all that time in commuting, right? And it does get a little tiring. So I would, the split between CLAT and school was 70-30. But in 12th, it became 99-1. So I, like all my projects, like I would do only as much as was required because I still couldn't fail, right? Because school is important as CLAT is. I can't slack off in that department either because if CLAT doesn't fail, I need to rely on predicted scores. So I would do all my assignments in school and try to get everything done during school hours because the moment I reach home, I'm going to have online classes, I'm going to have to give mocks, I'm going to have to read the newspaper. So I just did like a heavy demarcation of what I'm going to do in school and what I'm going to do at home.
All right. So how did you utilize your resources in an optimum manner?
Okay, so LegalEdge has so many resources. Initially, I found it overwhelming. But when you actually go one by one, like I designated different days to the different sections. So GK I would do every day because that is important. But my dad also really helped me in utilizing the resources. So he would sit with me and every single day he would help me make notes for GK and he would help me with active recall, passive recall. So I sometimes the PDFs are very long and lengthy and your brain is just tired. So I would just read maybe 1 or 2 pages every night or look at some YouTube videos or rewatch some of our old classes. So even if I'm not learning something new, at least I'm reinforcing something that I've already learned.
All right. What would be your suggestion for our 12th graders now?
Please focus on CLAT. Like teachers will always tell you that pre-boards are super important, these assignments are super important, and I'm not saying they aren't, but CLAT definitely has to take precedence because if you are working more towards plan B, plan A is bound to fail. Another thing that I have seen very, very often, even in the 12th graders in my school, they do not sleep. And that had people do not realize what a negative adverse impact that has on people because if you do not get your 7 to 8 hours, you will not be able to function properly and you will just work yourself to the point of exhaustion and that is not going to help anyone. Like obviously meet people, have fun because there has to be a flat life balance because all work and no play, it'll make you a dull boy, right? So definitely pay attention to CLAT. Pay attention to GK because that is one of the most throw you off your. Wait, I forgot the word. Can this be edited, please? Okay, so GK is one of those passages, sections that is just going to throw you off. So you can never be too prepared for GK. So just every day, even if you're taking out 30 minutes, you're doing better than most. Because I started off GK like really strong, but after 3 weeks, I'm like, I cannot do this. This is so boring, which is why my dad had to sit with me.
All right. So, when you started preparing for CLAT, what was your first mock score, and how did you work on it to make it reasonable or improvement? And did it demotivate you? And how did you work on that demotivation as well?
So my first mock score was 36.75. And I gave it online. So I actually did not finish the entire paper. I only did English, legal, and quant. So there was this time where I was so scared of GK, I would just leave the entire passage, which is such a stupid thing to do because that's like 35 marks. Like now the pattern has changed, but we gave a 35 marks GK section. You have 35 marks in your hand, and I would just leave it unattempted. But I was actually so demotivated. But then I sat with my parents and they talked me through it. They're like, this is your first mock. You haven't even been taking coaching for a week. It's completely fine. And I had this mentality of I'm an ICSE student, so I have to be the best at comprehension. And I think letting go of that was the best thing that I've done. Because how can you be the best at everything if you have no practice? I am not a prodigy. I have to work on it. So my mom helped me analyze those mocks, pinpoint my mistakes. And little by little, when I started giving more and more mocks, They did improve. Like my jump from 36 went to 65 in just one mock. And I don't think it fell from 65, but there was a point where my mock scores were between 65 to 70, dangerously close to CLAT. This is before November 11th. And I was so demotivated, I would just cry every time I was calculating my scores. Like I was in very deep denial. I would like calculate it on my laptop calculator, my phone calculator, my mom's phone's calculator, because I'm like, is software mein kuch gadbad hai? But really, it is very important to remember that it's not about the score; it's about the mistakes and how you can improve.
All right. So, as you've seen, CLAT as a journey is filled with good phases and bad phases. Good
Yes.
phases would be like giving you some overconfidence, maybe, or extra confidence. Bad phases will keep you demotivated, and it would be like, "अब मुझे कुछ करना ही नहीं है." So, how did you balance these, and how did you cope up with them and studied properly?
Okay, so one thing about me is that fundamentally I can never be overconfident. It is just not in my blood.
Okay.
So I remember my first 100 plus score. I got 115 and I was over the moon. I was jumping up and down. But when I reviewed the paper, I saw that I had made such silly mistakes. I could have scored so much more. So you always have to bring yourself down to earth. So whenever you're reviewing mocks, I would always review all 150 questions because sometimes tukkas also go right and you will not realize it until it's too late. So sometimes when I would score like very, very badly on a mock and I would be reviewing it, I would see one difficult passage that I had done well in. And that would make me a little happy. Like, there is hope for you, child. You can do this. So it's just very important to be kind to yourself. And remember, one single piece of paper cannot decide my future. I can say this because my future looks okay, but I still give this advice.
So CLAT is an examination based on your mindset.
Yes.
Comment.
So the most important thing about CLAT, like preparation definitely, what you do on exam day. Like there were so many people who had prepared better than me, scored better than me in mocks. They were in offline programs for 2 months, 2 years. And there is, as much as I hate to admit it, offline students do have that added advantage of the in-person interaction, right? And much more dedicated than I was, but they got cold feet on exam day and they did not get the ranks that they deserved. But I went in with a cool mindset. I knew that whatever was going to happen would be for the best. So before they gave us our papers and before the clock started running, I actually prayed to the universe and I said, whatever happens will happen for the best. I know that you're looking out for me and I'm not going to blame you if CLAT goes well and I'm not going to thank you if CLAT goes well. So I knew that this is in my hands. And the most important thing is to just, it's very hard, but to just switch off your brain for those 2 hours and just focus on what is in front of you. CLAT is no space for personal prejudices. If the author is telling you something like Ramayan is Christian, you have to believe it. You cannot let your personal beliefs or knowledge or common sense come in. It's all about believing what the author tells you, and it's all about getting to the best possible answer.
Right. So, what would be your tips for our students as there are just 5 months left for CLAT 2024?
Okay, so first of all, take mocks regularly,
Mhm.
but don't just take mocks, also analyze them. Don't be disheartened if you don't score well in mocks. I did not score well. Look where I am now. Then obviously attend all your classes regularly. Like even if you don't feel like it, if you just listen in, you will learn more from what you would get scrolling on your phone. Like there are just 5 minutes, five 5 months left. It's time to buckle up, and these 5 months, it's the last stretch, it's the last mile. Like work hard, play hard, and you will get everything that you deserve. Trust me.
All right. Any more tips, any more suggestions, or anything you want to add on that I might not have asked?
Oh, one more very, very important thing. GK is so important. It is so boring, but so important. because this time GK was difficult, so everybody suffered, and I got lucky because I had not invested that much time in GK. So I knew as much as the next guy, but you cannot rely on the paper coming in such a way that it caters to your interest. GK is a must, you have to do it from day one. Like I have developed such an aversion to GK that I refuse to read newspapers now. My parents are trying to get me to read it, but I'm like, no, I did enough during CLAT. I cannot do this anymore, which is bad. Please do not learn this from me. And one more thing, quant, like it's just 15 marks, but it can make or break your entire score. Like you really have to focus on those case sets because to some extent I feel like it is a lot less strenuous than the other passages because you don't have to read like 250, 350 word passages to answer just 5 questions. And one more thing, which is very, very important, don't follow an order just because somebody told you that it was right for them. That doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. Like, there are 5 months, it is sufficient time. Try different patterns. Like, if you want to start with English, start with English. If you don't feel comfortable, try legal, try quant. Do what feels right for you because on exam day, nobody is going to ask you what order you followed as long as you've done well.